Hi everybody, my name is Justine and I'm the Equality, Diversity, Inclusion Manager, and welcome to this series of videos where I'm talking to a number of allies across the university and ask them to explain why they are an ally. I'm going to talk particularly today about gender equality. At current estimates, workplace and economic gender equality won't be achieved until 2095, and at that rate, most of us won't be around to see it. So I asked Iain Clark to come along today to talk about gender equality. Good morning, Iain.
Good morning.
I invited Iain along because he's often very supportive of training and awareness sessions that I put on. I often see him at events such as International Women's Day. So Iain, first of all, could you explain to me what gender equality means to you?
Yes, it's always difficult to say this without sounding like you're trying for a round of applause on question time. But I think for me, it's just around equality of opportunity. It's around fairness. I think often what motivates me is an intense sense of frustration that things aren't fair or that things aren't understood to be unfair and people don't recognize the degree to which there are inequalities around gender in our society and in our systems and in our ingrained attitudes. Because I think a lot of people would say, oh, well, it's a lot better than it used to be. And I'm sure that is true, particularly in this country, perhaps not globally. But I'm very much motivated by a sense of injustice, I guess I would say, and a desire to try and help put that right.
So as I said, you're somebody who often does come and support events, which you may not naturally think would be something that you would be interested in. So you've come along to International Women's Day, and we often comment that on events like that, which are open to everybody, often men are in the minority. I think there was about three male members of staff that were at the last event out of a total of about 80 people. So why do you come along to events such as that?
I think there's a real risk that feminism gets ghettoized as a women's issue, which of course at some level it fundamentally is. But if men don't participate in those events, then women aren't going to be able to make whole systems that involve men change without men reflecting and recognizing that we play a part in those systems. And I think it's important to try and understand and also just demonstrate support for things, to be honest. So, again, things are a lot better than they used to be. And people say, oh, do we really need a Women's Day? But there are lots of ingrained attitudes. I was talking online the other day because there was a government advisor said that girls don't study maths because they just don't like it. And that this was a natural thing and we shouldn't really worry about it because that's just what girls were like. And there were a group of scientists got together, female scientists, and wrote a rebuttal to that with some really hard facts that completely blew that point of view out of the water in terms of, well, let's look at what girls do study and let's look at the subjects that they are successful in and let's show that actually that isn't the case. So if that isn't the case, then something else must be holding them back. And if we just say, oh, well, that's just what girls are like, then we never challenge those systems because we assume that there aren't inequalities built into them and therefore we won't improve them. And there are all sorts of examples like that.
Mm. One of the things that I recently saw you do, which made me smile a lot and punch the air a little bit, was that you appeared on Points of View, actually, and you are quite a prolific tweeter, mainly showing off your fantastic artwork, but you also do make some political statements, or political with a small p. And one of the tweets that you made, which resulted in you going on Points of View, was that you talked about how your daughter had responded to it was a scene where there was a potential suggestion that there were some feelings between the female doctor and the female assistant, and there was just a hint of that.
Mm-hmm.
And I know there was quite a sort of debate that went on then on Twitter about how appropriate that was or otherwise. Tell us a little bit about that and the sort of conversation you had with your daughter, and then why you felt it was important to then go on Points of View when you were asked.
Okay, so my daughter's 10 years old, and I'm very cautious of saying that I'm a feminist because of my daughter, because I'm not, because I've been a feminist for a long time before I had a daughter. And I know that that's a thing. that sometimes meant, well, I've got a daughter and I wouldn't want her to be treated that way. But my daughter actually got into Doctor Who because Jodie Whittaker was cast as the Doctor because of a female Doctor. And she's gone back and watched loads of Doctor Who and she loves them all. But it was the representation of having a woman Doctor that actually attracted her to the show. And that's a huge deal for her. She's really into the idea that the Doctor is a woman. So that's the reason we're watching it in the first place. But I always try and use things that the girls see on television as an opportunity for a conversation. And in this case, I mean, it was a really mild conversation of unrequited or requited romantic feelings and lots of longing looks and so forth. But she was absolutely absorbed in that romance, if you like, in exactly the same way she would have been if it was a heterosexual romance. And there wasn't really any questioning of that. We've discussed in the past that some men marry women and some women marry men, but some women marry women and some men marry men. And I think what struck me was just how natural it seemed to her. And we used this as the opportunity to have a little bit of a conversation about the fact that that's a thing that happens. But she had no pre-existing prejudice about that at all. And that might be partly down to the environment in which she's been raised, but I think it's also just about what she sees and absorbs and the representation that she sees and absorbs around these issues. And she was not at all perturbed by it. And I see a lot of comments on the internet about children being exposed to teaching around LGBTQ plus issues and how this amounts to sex education, or it's somehow inappropriate for a young person to be exposed to. But there was nothing inappropriate about the level on which she was engaging it, which was just about two people liking one another. So the reason I went on Points of View, they contacted me off the back of my tweet, which got a few retweets and so on, and they kind of said, "Oh, this is interesting. Would you like to talk about it?" And I kind of hesitated because they wanted me to talk on camera, which I'm doing now, but I don't like very much. And then I thought, no, it is important to put that point of view, because the very reason that they're asking me means that they no doubt will be sharing some angry why letters from people who didn't feel it was appropriate. And therefore, it is important that somebody puts that point of view. I did think, as I was agreeing to this, I really hope they speak to some gay women about this topic. And they didn't. So it's perhaps unfortunate that they centered the cis straight white guy in this conversation who just happened to have a daughter. But I think I was able to put that point of view well. But I see a lot of women online who are absolutely feel seen by that relationship on screen and are passionate about the show as a result of that being seen on screen. It's a bit of a shame that they weren't also able to say that on the TV show.
Absolutely. Thank you for that, Iain. As I said, I've invited you along to talk about why you are visible vocally and also in terms of your presence, particularly at the university. I suppose what I'd like to ask you now is, because the purpose of this is to try to encourage people who are maybe at the moment a bit neutral about their feelings towards engaging with equality, diversity and inclusion, why you believe it's important to do so. I think you've touched on it a little bit at the beginning where you said you do attend things like International Women's Day because you need to be part of the solution to helping with maybe structural inequalities that exist within organisations, as an example. But is there anything else that you would say to people like yourself about getting engaged with the topic?
Yeah, I think for me, it's mainly about trying to help other people. It's about recognizing that I do have some privilege, and I know words like privilege get parodied and become a bit of a tired term sometimes. But recognizing that I have advantages both in how my life has gone and also in just the opportunity to be listened to that perhaps some other people have to a lesser degree, and it's all relative. And white feminists have more privilege than black feminists and so on. But I recognize that I have some privilege, and therefore I have opportunities to speak up perhaps and just demonstrate that this matters not just to the people most directly affected, but also that I can be more readily heard in some situations. I don't want to overstate it because there are lots of very, very vocal women who talk about these issues as well. And it's difficult sometimes not to centre myself as the white bloke sounding off about these issues, and I sometimes do reflect on whether I am the most appropriate person to be saying some of these things. But at the same time, if I don't speak up and bolster the voices of women, then they are speaking in a little bit more of an isolated way, and maybe other men don't reflect as much as they might otherwise do. And so maybe I can just chip in a bit and help out a bit.
Iain, thank you. I personally appreciate all that you do in terms of supporting my work, apart from anything else, and being there. But you are also, you're not a performative ally. You know, you are somebody who speaks up. I've seen you get into arguments with people on Twitter. I like it and appreciate it very much. So thank you very much for this conversation.
Thank you.